everyone, welcome to another video. My name is Lizzie and today I have my April wrap-up for you. April was another busy reading month. Pretty much every month this year I read a lot of books. I read 13 books in total in April, and we're going to go through them all. We'll make it speedy, we'll make it snappy, and as always we are going from least favourite through to my favourite. We're going to be ranking the books that I read in April. In the description you'll find a list of all of the books and also where I got them from. So without any further ado, we're going to start off with the only 2-star book I read in April. This was a very mixed bag of a book. It was my buzzword reading challenge pick, and that is Love Hope by Juliet Ann Conlin. So when I say it was a mixed bag, I nearly DNF'd this halfway through. And I would have if it weren't for the fact that it was my buzzword pick and I didn't really have a backup option or time to start something new. So I kept going just so I could complete the challenge. And I'm glad I did keep going because the end improved, but boy did it slow down in the middle. This is the story of a young woman who loves to play the violin. She learns to play the violin as a child, and then her parents are tragically killed and she gives it up. She can't bring herself to play it anymore, and it's kind of following her as she finds her place as an adult in life and her family and friends and all the various things that go along with that. Now on the cover, and as this book is sort of billed, is that she becomes pen pals with a resident of the local elderly people's home, and they kind of help each other and support each other, and they do, but that wasn't really like a significant part of the story. You know, it felt like it came in quite late, I thought. What I did really like is this whole story was told through letters, through text messages, emails, newspaper articles. It was all kind of mostly letters and communication, but also a couple of other little bits and bobs in there as well, which I did really like as a storytelling device. The thing, there was no big conflict or even big kind of this is what I want, this is the goal. There was nothing driving the story at all. And you know me, I love a character-driven novel. I don't necessarily need a plot to enjoy a story. But even if you don't have a plot, you still need to have character motivations. There still needs to be something that makes me want to carry on reading. And halfway through, I was like, I don't know what anyone wants out of this story. Like, it was just documents. It did pick up towards the end. More stuff started to happen towards the end. But yes, this was not a hit for me, unfortunately. Honestly, all my reading challenge books were a bit of a letdown this month. I have 3 reading challenges that I do every month, and they were my least 3 favourite books of the month. So next up is my non-fiction reading challenge, and for that I read Listen to This by Alex Ross. Now, if you've watched my Try a Chapter video, you will remember that I read the first chapter and really enjoyed it. I gave this book 3 stars overall. And yes, I read the first chapter, really enjoyed it. I read the second chapter, really enjoyed it. And the rest of it was just, nah. The idea of this book and kind of what the blurb indicates and what the first 2 chapters indicate is that it is drawing parallels between different genres of music, and I found that fascinating. Like, the second chapter is all about how the same musical techniques of lament that we see in Baroque music, we also see in blues, for example, and I love that. I think that's really interesting, and I would have loved to read a whole book on that. But after that, it was just kind of, it was articles, basically. It's a collection of articles, and some of them were following a particular artist on tour, or reflections on a particular composer, and there wasn't really enough to tie it all together for me. Yes, it was a collection of writings about music with this sort of preface of, isn't it cool to draw all these links to kind of almost, it felt like an excuse to put them all in one book, almost. So yes, this was a 3-star read for me, this one. A bit of a letdown. The other challenge that I give myself every month is a round the world challenge. So I pick a book set in another country, ideally written by someone who either is from that country or has roots in that country somehow. And so I read Of Women and Salt by Gabriela Garcia this month for my Around the World, and I won't read the whole blurb out to you because it's quite long, but the blurb of this book makes it sound like a ongoing multi-generational story about moving from Cuba to Florida and the trials that these women went through across the decades and the centuries. And this wasn't really it. It was mostly all about one character, and I did really like that character. And then it had sort of flashbacks to members of her family, to her ancestors in the past. And it would literally be one chapter for each one. They never really got to establish themselves or really link it through to the main story in the way that I wanted it to. It felt like the whole goal of this book was to say, look, isn't what these women went through terrible? And it was terrible. I just wanted something more. I don't know what I expected from this book, but it didn't really deliver. I don't know if I've made any sense at all. I have one more 3-star book to talk to you about, and this one I did enjoy much more. It was very much on the cusp of 3 and 4 stars, and that is The Reaper's Quota by Sarah McKnight. This follows one of many reapers. It's a big company, they've outsourced, and he is given his quota, as you can tell from the title. He has not yet met his monthly quota of random deaths. He has to go out and choose 30 people to randomly kill. And on the way, he is thinking about who he should pick and why, and starts to evaluate his own kind of morals and ethics. And it really explores those different ideas of, it's basically a thought experiment in a book. So I did really enjoy that philosophical approach. There was only one time I think that I was like, no, we shouldn't do that. But most of it was really interesting as these kind of ideas of basically, if you had to choose, who would you choose? The only downside for me is, given that the whole premise was basically if you had to choose, who would you choose? When the Reaper discovers that he didn't necessarily have to choose, it kind of undermined the idea of the story. So it wasn't quite as fleshed out and thought through as I would have liked, but lots of really, really interesting ideas. On to the 4-star books. So we had the audiobook of The Hunted and the Hind by A.L. Lester. This is the final book in the Lost in Time trilogy. And you know what? I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. To be honest, the sort of main plot, the like paranormal battle element, didn't really stick with me. But the romance in this book was really, really wonderful. It's a different romance from the first 2 books in the series, and it just had so much heart and had me driving along just being like, oh. So yes, very much enjoyed this one. Again, lots of really interesting ideas and approaches to how we think of gender in a historical fiction context, which I really enjoyed. Keeping with the spooky paranormal element, Inheriting Her Ghosts by S.H. Cooper. This is about a woman who inherits, as you can guess from the title, she inherits a big house from a distant relative, and things are not quite as they seem. This is one of those books where if you look at the cover and you look at the title and you think, I reckon I'd enjoy that book, you will enjoy this book. It's exactly what it promises. It completely delivers on that spooky ghost story and has a really sort of great protagonist. She's very pragmatic, very she is willing to confront the ghosts so that other people don't have to, basically. And I really liked that. I thought that was a nice kind of approach to a ghost story. It's a ghostly novella. If you like ghostly novellas, you will really like this one. It's really well written. It's just great. Still in the 4-star zone, Rule Nostalgia by Hannah Rose Woods. This is a non-fiction book, and it's a history book that kind of goes backwards. So starting in the present day, or in very recent history, it looks at how we are nostalgic for the past. So in 2020, for example, when we had the lockdown, and there was all this talk about Blitz spirit, and basically using that idea of how in the UK our national identity is very much built on nostalgia, and how you can trace that back for about 500 years, that we've always looked back. Whatever we've been looking back to, whether it was looking back to Victorian values or to like Arthurian legend, whatever we're looking back to, our whole national identity is built on nostalgia. Very fitting on Coronation Weekend to be talking about this book. It definitely reframes a lot of what we think we know about history. It's much more of a giving you an alternative viewpoint rather than like new things about history. There wasn't much that I was like, I never knew that. But there were quite a lot of kind of, I hadn't thought of it that way before. That was the kind of angle it took. And then the final 4-star book, which I was so on the fence as to whether to give this 4 or 5 stars, In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. Of course, this has been a very anticipated release. I did really, really enjoy this. It's Pinocchio inspired. It follows the story of Pinocchio with little Frankenstein twists set in the robot uprising. It shouldn't work, but it mostly did. Mostly is why I got 4 stars rather than 5 stars. You've got all of these different ideas going on, and TJ Klune just about managed to stitch them all together. There were just a few moments that I almost wished he'd ignored the Pinocchio thing and done his own thing for that little section or whatever it was. But just like The House in the Cerulean Sea, it's full of heart, it's full of love and joy, and it's just a really, really lovely story. It's a proper page turner. Once you start, you can't put it down. I just really, really enjoyed it. We are into the 5-star zone, and I read some truly incredible books this month for 5-star reads, and I really struggled to rank all of these. But first up, I listened to the audiobook of Henry VIII, The Heart and the Crown by Alison Weir. It will surprise no one, this is one of my most highly anticipated books of the year, and I was so excited that I got to read it early. I got to listen to the audiobook and read it early. And this is in the vein of her 6 Tudor Queen series. This is basically a fictional biography of Henry VIII, by which I mean it is historically accurate, it's all about his life, but it's a fiction novel. This is one I was very intrigued for because the 6 Tudor Queens and the direct prequel to this one, which was about Elizabeth of York, were very much people, specifically women, whose stories have not necessarily been told to their fullest extent. Whereas this is Henry VIII. We know so much about Henry VIII. And he undeniably did many terrible things, such as behead 2 of his wives. And what I really appreciated in this book is there was no attempt at redemption, but there was also no kind of villainising him. This was a judgment-free zone for Henry VIII. We did not provide him with validation, but we also did not criticise him. It was sort of presenting his life as he saw it, and from his perspective, he's been put in all these awful situations where the only way out of it has been to accuse a wife of treason or something. It was such a good insight into what his life would have been like and what the world and his world mindset would have been like. It was so clear from the start. It was so clear from the start that this is someone who's never been denied anything, and so is always blind to the manipulations going on around him. And it was just a really interesting kind of look into who his character might have been, given that this is a figure we know so much about. And now for something completely different. The next 5-star read was Margo Zimmerman Gets the Girl by Brianna Arshram and Sarah Waxelbaum. This is a YA contemporary romance, and so Margo Zimmerman, here on the front cover, she realises that she's gay and decides if she's going to come out, if she's going to be a part of this community, she is going to be the best gay. She is going to learn everything. She's going to do everything. She's going to learn how to sit like a gay person, how to dress like a gay person, how to talk like a gay person. And so she enlists the help of Abby, who is failing her AP history class and needs help from the school valedictorian top nerd person. So they trade lessons in queerness and queer culture for AP history. And it was just really sweet and really fun and had so much heart. And it's something that's so rarely discussed, or I think it's just a really interesting topic to kind of have a book about, is how we present ourselves in relation to queer identity, and how there is pressure to present yourself a certain way and feel like you fit in by dressing a certain way and conforming to all of these standards. And I thought that was a really interesting topic and an important topic to discuss. There was also really great neurodivergent representation in this. So Margo is autistic and Abby has undiagnosed ADHD, and these are obviously, it's a part of their character, it's who they are, and so that is sort of brought up throughout the story as well, and I thought it was done in a really good way. These last three were so hard to rank. But coming in third place is Young Women by Jessica Moore, and I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Tanya Reynolds, she was Mrs. Elton in the new Emma film. If I say this was a messy story, I mean it in the best way. It's about these women in their mid-20s finding their way in the world, and it very quickly becomes not about the Me Too movement, but about moving on from something like that, recovering from something like that, and how even as a woke person who feels like you know all about that sort of thing, the difference between that and confronting it happening to your friends. There's so much commentary in this book and so much discussion on victimhood, on what a good victim looks like, on how a good victim is supposed to behave, and how they're treated by their friends, even feminist friends. And there were just so many layers to it, so much going on. I don't really want to discuss it too much here because I think you should read it for yourself. I think everyone should read it and listen to the audiobook. And then I want to discuss it with people who have read it because there is so much going on. Nothing is really resolved in this book. Some things are resolved, some things are left very open-ended, and I was very glad for that. For a split second towards the end, I thought it was all going to be tied off happily with a bow, and I was like, no, I can't. This isn't that sort of book. But it didn't. It had enough open ending to it, enough bad things happening alongside the good things towards the end. In second place, and this is another one of my most highly anticipated reads for the year, Something Spectacular by Alexis Hall. This is the kind of sequel to Something Fabulous, and I loved it so much. It was so good. I think this was better than Something Fabulous. I loved Something Fabulous. And this was even better. It was so great. If you haven't read Something Fabulous, this duology, these two books are queer Regency, campy joy, and I love it. I truly, truly love it. So in this book, we have Peggy, who was the on-off partner for one of the main characters in Something Fabulous, and she meets opera singer Orfeo, who is visiting London, and they strike up a romance. They fall for each other, even though they're trying not to. In the last few wrap-ups, because I've read a lot of queer historical fiction recently, and I've been talking about how to get that happy ending, how to land a happy ending, how to make it convincing, how to explore these ideas in a historical context. And this book does it brilliantly, partly by just sort of ignoring the fact that there are societal expectations. Like, these characters are like, you know what, we're rich, we're just gonna live together. And this book is a bit different from Something Fabulous in the way that the characters are viewed by society, but it's much more about celebrating joy. And this book really explores gender as well, much more than the first one does. So both characters we would nowadays describe as non-binary. Orfeo uses they them pronouns, Peggy uses she her pronouns and is more sort of gender fluid. Sometimes dresses in a more masculine or a more feminine way, but doesn't feel like a woman in that way. And so actually having those two characters together in this context, they understood each other in a world that's so gendered. They understood each other in that way, and it was just really nice. It was just a really nice read. It was really lovely. Oh, well done if you've made it this far. One book left, and the best book that I read in April, If Tomorrow Doesn't Come by Jen St. Jude. This is the latest queer apocalyptic book. I'm loving that subgenre is really having a moment right now. And the main character, Avery, she is battling with depression, and on the morning that she plans to end her life, she gets an alert on her phone that an asteroid is going to hit in 9 days' time. So she puts off her plans, she goes to see her parents, she visits with her childhood best friend / not so secret love, and reconnects with all of her loved ones and reevaluates her idea of past and future and her relationship with herself. And it was, I can't put into words the emotional impact this book has. It's beautifully written. It's so powerful and so subtle as well. Like, there's no point in this book that I can be like, this is the turning point, this is the moment, this is the scene. There are some moments that really stand out to me, but the book as a whole is that entire journey. So if you're looking for a book about mental health, about queerness, about family, about your future, it was so good. It was just so good. This book also got me thinking about this whole subgenre of kind of queer apocalyptic fiction. What is it that works? What is it that draws us to it? And when you have a life-changing event coming up, or, you know, when the end of the world is on the horizon, of course it would force us to confront all of our demons, all of our secrets, to come clean and resolve any issues with our family members. Of course that appeals to queer readers and to queer stories. It feels like a very obvious match when you sort of frame it in that way. And this book is the best of that, because there's so much unresolved at the start of this book. And the flashbacks are used throughout the book really, really well. Sometimes flashbacks can be, I don't know, they're hit and miss. And in this one, it was a definite hit. It works really, really well to kind of build up that picture of Avery's life, and so we could see how she's gonna move forward. And that is it. Thank you for joining me. If you did make it to the end, first of all, well done. It was a lot of books, and well, the filming was very chaotic. Hopefully in editing we can make this more coherent. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you read in April, and if you've read any of these books, what did you think? Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me. Thank you very much, everyone, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra for now.